It's good to see you this evening. I'm not only happy to be with you, I'm happy that I'm able to be with you because I had an interesting teacher showed up in my life this week. And I had last week woke up one morning with a severe case of vertigo. It just came out of nowhere. I know what vertigo is, but I've never experienced it before. And for those of you who don't know much about it, they say as you get older, one of the joys of getting older is that it can be more common. It's actually quite common. And I'm much better now. Doctor expected, he says, from most people do recover from it. You know, it's a pretty short bout, although there are people, I know several people who walk around with canes. They don't really need the cane except, they can have an attack of vertigo, so they have to walk around with canes. So it doesn't always clear up for everyone. And I won't say too much, but just a few things about it that, again, it just woke up some morning and there it was. I was lying in bed and it really felt like the bed was going to just flip over and throw me out of the bed onto the floor. And I knew that wasn't happening, so I could use, my concentration but boy, it was just the strangest feeling. And I had to breathe through it. And it was so strong for a couple of days that I really wasn't functioning much at all. It wasn't painful, but it was really unpleasant. I never actually fell over. I think it can get that strong for people. It could be very strong, but when it wasn't at the most strong, I could walk around, but certainly it could feel like, perhaps I could have just fallen over. It felt like you're just going to lose your balance, and the room was spinning, that sort of thing. And then, in addition, if you've ever gone on a roller coaster, I haven't done it too much, but I've had the experience of being on a really big roller coaster where I'd be quite nauseous and even thrown up a few times. It's happened to me in my life. I had a light, it wasn't that strong, but a light dose of that, I guess, coming just from it's the same kind of thing. It's an inner ear thing. So it was highly unpleasant. And so I want to come back to that in a bit, but it's really been in my mind about, we talk about so much about, as Dharma practitioners, the idea of using life as a teacher. I don't know if life itself has in mind being our teacher. I can't say. As far as I can tell, life's just happening. But certainly, if we want to find what the Dharma is pointing to in terms of a liberation through non-clinging, in the midst of this crazy human condition that we all find ourselves in, then the suggestion is we may want to take that idea of using life as a teacher very seriously. And, we work with what we have at whatever point in our life. I think for anything that we might want to learn, perhaps not waiting to the last minute could be helpful. So we've had some experience, and I like to think of life as my teacher a lot. But I noticed that sometimes when the teachings are there, I'm not thinking, hey, this is great, life's my teacher. I can't tell you how many Dharma talks I've given on impermanence and the transitory nature of life. But sometimes I have to laugh at myself. I wonder when the teaching comes to me, if in truth, all those talks, that was up for all of you, not for me. But the teacher will find me, whether I am open to it or not. And so it was quite an interesting this last week working with it, and I really spent some time just hanging out with it. Oh, also my mind wasn't that clear. It's like being dizzy, so I really wasn't able, I could function basically, but not that well, really. So my mind wasn't clear. I was having trouble finding words. So, and I really spent some time reflecting if this is how it was going to be. You know, say it was never going to get better. It was going to stay at this level for the rest of my life. You know, how would I be about that? And since I was pretty sure it, in fact, it has, I think I'm 98% healed up from it. And, you know, who knows, someday it could come again. And I expected it to heal up. I didn't really get to do that experiment. It reminds me of when I used to do, I spent a lot of years doing a prison Dharma work. Haven't done that kind of work for many years, but and it was quite impressive going into a few prisons I worked in, and especially the men who were doing sentences, life without the possibility of parole. They just called it for shorthand, life without. And speaking with some of the men, I'm not saying all of them, but for a number of the men who had been in for a long time, they weren't going to get out, I think it forced them into a level of, it was just right in their face, and it forced a level of, because there was no getting around it, it forced a level of either just being in suffering and anger and fighting, a fight you can't win, or it forced a profound letting go and non-clinging. And then out of that, something more profound arose in their minds. And some of these men, I remember being with them, and it was funny, I'm going in as the teacher, but I really felt like, you know, it was like I was with, I don't know, the guru or something, being with these guys, because they're just profound presence and I would say wisdom that some of them had. And they would share that it took years and they wouldn't have asked for that. There was a woman I remember when I was teaching in, I did a weekend in Tucson, Arizona. This was years ago. And I met a woman who was in a wheelchair, and her fingers were quite crooked and sort of gnarled up. And she was suffering from, I don't know, some kind of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. I don't remember the exact. And in speaking with her, she was in, she had chronic pain. So she said she was never completely free from pain. I don't really know if she was in, you know, in the scale of 1 to 10, if she was in a 10 all the time, but she never was out of pain. And the thing that struck me about her was that she just had a glow about her and just this beautiful presence and smile. And I asked her about it. And she said something very similar to the men in prison. She said, you know, she wouldn't have asked for that teacher. But given, and of course, if she could be free of that condition, certainly she would. But given that that's what she had, again, she wasn't asking for it, but given that that's what was there was also, along with the suffering, really the blessing and the teaching she shared in what it forced in the liberation through non-clinging. And many of you have heard, I've talked about when I was done myself, a year-long meditation retreat. Won't go into details I've sometimes shared, but that the real, what was the power of it, I had always thought the power of it was going to be in these deep, amazing meditative states that, you know, you're just meditating all day long, every day, in silence for a year, right? So it's like you're going to really cultivate these amazing meditative states. And I think any of you who've done any kind of retreats or even in your daily life practice know that those do come, and there's a tremendous importance and value in that for sure. But the real power was in, again, the forcing into the letting go and the non-clinging, because you can, you know, you can sort of gut it out or tough it out for a few days, maybe in the retreat, on a retreat when it's hard. But you can't really do that for a month, 2 months, a year, or whatever. It's hard. So it's the same kind of feeling as long as you choose to stay. The people in prison, the woman in the wheelchair didn't have a choice. When you do a retreat, you do have a choice, but assuming, you know, you've made a commitment, you're going to stay. Again, it forces this level of letting go. So the same thing in a condensed version happened for me with the vertigo, even though it was uh, only a few days that was really bad, and then each day just got better and better. But for those few days when it was the strongest, I couldn't make it stop. I couldn't get away from it. Um, there wasn't any relief. There was nothing I could find to do at all. And I tried. Looking online, I talked to my doctor, this, that. And so it was similar in a sort of mini version of that. And so I appreciate that as a teacher, in that I'm thankful that I'm not struggling with it now. I'm imagining, you don't have, I'm not particularly asking anyone here to share, but who knows when we open up the sharing in a little bit what people will say, but I'm just imagining some of you are maybe dealing with your own chronic situations. It may be your health, maybe financial situations or relationships or something in your mind, or, we all have whatever we have to deal with in our lives. And I think the power when if we're open to it, it's not going to be pleasant, I don't think. It's not like the unpleasant is going to become pleasant when we let go into it. But if we're really able to let go, everything kind of stays the same, but we don't add a layer of stress and contraction and reactivity on top of it. And this is of course, the famous teaching of the two arrows that's used so often, but it's exactly what it's talking about. That I think most of you know it, but in case one or two don't, where actually someone asked the Buddha about and he was explaining the difference between someone who's fully liberated, you'd say enlightened, someone like a Buddha, and an ordinary person. And he said, well, everyone, doesn't matter if you're liberated or not, you're in a human body, you're in the world, you experience all the ups and downs. We all experience certainly suffering in the body for sure. The Buddha had a bad back, and it's not like he was so transcendent that it didn't bother him. He had to go lie down, and there's stories where he told Ananda. Ananda was the Buddha's personal attendant for last 25 years of the Buddha's life. He was also the Buddha's younger cousin. He said to Ananda, I got to lie down. Tone of voice is added by me. I don't know how he said it, but he said, I have to go lie down. You have to go give the Dharma talk. So, he had to deal with all that. So and they likened it to being shot with an arrow that, we all feel the pain. But the problem is that most of us then add on top of that a level of reactivity and suffering and an inability to be with, to let things be. And so we add a second layer of suffering. It's like being shot with a second arrow, whereas the people who have liberated minds tend not to do that. And so, for them, it's like only getting shot the one time. Now, I remember when I heard that, I thought, that's it? I'm either shot once or twice. There's no other options here. I don't know what I'm signing up for. Maybe I want a different spiritual tradition. But I think that the teachings are really inviting us and asking us. You don't even have to hold it that it's all suffering. It's just asking us to open to and bring enough awareness so we're not just in this reactive, kind of unconscious or non-mindful, if you will, flow. I call it being on automatic pilot, just lost in the effect of things. And, we can go through life like that, and probably, I think all of us will have times when we do that. And many people will spend their whole life that way. And what we're being invited to do is, when we use this term wake up, which I'm sure many of you have heard, it's really just asking us to bring some, I don't know the words you like best, wakeful presence, mindfulness, awareness to what's happening. So we know what's happening. And then it's just asking us to look and see, because life is what it is. Of course, we're going to keep involving ourselves in life, and we want to aim life in a good direction, and that can right. We don't want to go seek out suffering. Hopefully, we don't need that kind of teacher, although there are people who do that. But we just have to stay open and receptive. and then look and see, how are we doing? What is life serving up? And then how are we doing? It's really quite simple. And one way to think about all of these trainings, the formal meditations we do, and just all of the Dharma practice, is to enable us really two things: to be more present and awake and less on automatic pilot. So more of the time we know what's happening. And then, but that's not enough, because then sometimes we can know what's happening, but our ability, our skill, or the strength to be able to then really let be and let go may not have come up to meet what's happening. I've had many times in my life where I was quite aware of what's happening, and I was quite aware that I was suffering, and it was all just reactivity in my mind, and I still had not found the way to let go, to find the freedom in that moment. And so I think we don't have to use just the suffering and the difficult times, when the vertigo or whatever else happens in each of our lives, but we can just stay open more and more all of the time. One of the problems I think that can happen for all of us is that when things are going well, we can become complacent, and we just kind of going along. Things are going okay, and it's not that we want to become tense or tie ourselves in a knot during those times when things are going okay and we're not suffering. You just one of the things I've found about for me, there's a path of practice in which people will take mindfulness in daily life as a practice, and then as they're going about daily life, will purposely, consciously be using just the flow of experience, whatever's happening, to put their mind on it and be mindful. When you pick up your telephone, you consciously feel the phone in your hand. When you're eating, and that's a path that gets talked about a lot and is an important path for many people. That's not really been my own path, although certainly I do those practices some and have. But what I found for myself, which is just a different style, is that out of the formal sitting practice, and so you have to see for yourself what serves you best. I'm just offering this as another way. That place of knowing what's happening is more present, not as a practice, but as a fruit of practice. And it becomes more of a relaxed knowing, if you will, or a relaxed presence, and not so much you have to do. But either way is fine. It's just personal style. So you don't have to tie yourself in knots. You just know what's happening in the moment, automatically, naturally. And then we don't have to go looking. We don't worry about the times when we lose our mindfulness and we're on automatic pilot. You can't do anything about that. But more and more of the time we know what's happening. And then the invitation is right there. And it's up to us if we want to do it, if we find ourselves suffering. So if I've got vertigo, the vertigo doesn't care, right? My opinion about it. It's just, that's what vertigo does. I'm not blaming it. Vertigo makes it so you can't stand up, and you're dizzy, and you feel nauseous, and you can't think. So, I can't blame the vertigo from just doing what vertigo does. So then it's up to me. Do I want to suffer and fight and worry? And I'm not saying I had none of that. When it first happened, it was like, what is this? Is it, am I having a stroke? Actually went through my mind, is it a brain tumor? A little bit. I didn't spin up, but a little bit. I was just like, I better call the doctor. It's not going away. And then he said, no, you're okay. But we can fall into these struggles, or we have a choice. We may not be able to get out of the suffering, but we can at least incline ourselves and stay open to the possibility of just asking the question, can I let go and let be around this? I think using what we have ahead of time, I hope, can at least give us a better chance when the big one comes, which we're all facing, right? When it's the time of our own deaths, which we know ahead of time is coming. And it's not to be morose or depressed or freak us out. These reflections on death get a lot of attention in traditional Buddhist practices. They actually are not for everyone, because sometimes it's scary for people, and then what they really need are to do other practices that can maybe gladden the heart and mind, and reflecting on their good qualities and reflecting on the beneficence of the Buddha or deities, or, there's all these things, which is important because it can make our heart, and then when we're ready, if we're ready, perhaps it can serve us to open to death. So we want to be respectful of our own, where we're at and what will serve us. It's not like a one size fits all. So you don't want to just throw yourselves in. But for those of us, if it's time, it can also serve us just to be aware about, just the transitory nature of life. And then the last thing I'll offer is that what I found is knowing the situation that we're all in together. Because if it's not vertigo, it's going to be something else. Isn't it true? We're either dealing with it now or we will. Even if you're in the small percentage of people who don't have many complaints, if nothing else, the body slows down, right? We all know this. Some of you, if you're younger, you don't know it yet, but stick around a little while. And some of you are a little older than me. I'm 67, so I'm not going to get any, as my mother said to me, honey, you're not getting any sympathy from me. I think I was complaining when I turned 50. I said, I can't believe it. I'm 50. It's like, she just laughed. And now I'm 67, and in about 3 or 4 months, I'm going to be 68. And it's like, oh my God, in 2 more years, I'll be 70. 70? What? What happened? And so it goes back to I was kind of making a joke, but actually there was some truth to it about having given, you'd think after giving literally hundreds of talks on impermanence and letting go and non-clinging, I like to think a little of it would go in, but I've got to tell you, when the next slowdown happens, where my vision's, I guess I could get some surgery, but it's like, my glasses prescription, it just needs to keep getting tweaked, stronger. It's not getting less. It's getting, it just all keeps heading in a certain direction. And I'm reminded of a woman I met years ago who was, this was quite a long time ago, but she was well into her 80s, and she told me that her experience was life had shifted from just everything that had occupied her life, her hopes and dreams and her ambitions, or just the things to do. And it had more and more shifted just in learning more and more just about letting go, because life more and more falls away, drops away, doesn't work right. Whatever. And it was all just, it's not that she was doing that because she was some great Dharma practitioner, but that's what was sort of being sort of forced upon her, really, because of this, as everything falls away. Her, she's telling me, I remember her, friends dying, dead or dying, body not working, on and on and on. And so I hope that we will all, again, in a way that doesn't freak us out or scare us, but just when the time's right, if the time's right, to let the teachings on impermanence come in and really use it. I don't know if we'll ever be in love with it, but I have certainly found that what happens in the times, and I'm sure for many of you, the times when I really have been able to find the letting go and the rested more in the stream of non-clinging, that consciousness or awareness of non-clinging can, it feels like it can mean anything. I mean, I haven't tested it. Maybe there would be boundaries, but it's much more. I think it's more subtle than the happiness that comes in kind of the normal sense that we think of happiness in the world. But the happiness of non-clinging might be more subtle. But I found it to be much more satisfying personally. So I'll stop with that.